It's the summer of 2020, and a sailor is crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, a narrow passage between Spain and North Africa where the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean, a normal routine crossing that many follow every day. As he is driving the boat, he gets pushed by something underneath. The boat begins to shudder, and the rudder stops responding. The crew sends for help. When rescuers arrive, they find the culprits, a group of killer whales. Since that first incident, around 600 boats in the region have been hit. At least 5 have completely sunk. Reports of killer whale interactions with vessels more than tripled over just 2 years. Sailors started fitting their boats with protective gear. Authorities began issuing warnings. An entire app was built specifically to track where the orcas were so sailors could reroute around them. And the behavior hasn't stopped. If anything, it's escalating. But here's what makes this really unsettling. These aren't random animals acting on instinct. The same group of around 40 individuals is responsible for every single incident, which raises a question that is difficult to answer. Are they doing this on purpose? We first need to understand what orca whales actually are, because almost everything most people think they know about them is wrong. Let's start with the name, killer whale. It's one of the most misleading names in the animal kingdom, and it's misleading in both directions. Because first of all, orcas are not whales. They are the largest member of the dolphin family, which puts them in the same bracket as bottlenose dolphins and common dolphins. The word whale in their common name is essentially a historical accident, a label given by sailors who saw something enormous in the water and reached for the biggest word they had. The origin of the name is actually even more interesting than that. The earliest recorded name for them came from ancient sailors who watched them hunt. Spanish sailors called them asesina de balenas, which translates to whale killers. They named them this because they watched these animals coordinate to take down prey far larger than themselves, including actual whales. At some point over the centuries, that name got flipped. Whale killers became killer whales, and the label stuck, even though it tells you the wrong thing about what they are. Their scientific name tells a better story. Orcinus orca. Orcinus comes from Orcus, the Roman god of the underworld. The Romans, who encountered them in the Mediterranean, named them after death itself, which, when you understand what these animals are actually capable of, starts to feel less dramatic and more accurate. Orcas belong to the order Cetacea, which includes all whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And the story of how any of these animals ended up in the ocean is one of the most extraordinary evolutionary stories in natural history. Around 50 million years ago, the ancestors of modern cetaceans were land animals, 4-legged, wolf-like creatures called Pakicetus that lived along the shorelines of what is now Pakistan and India. They waded into shallow water to hunt fish, gradually spending more and more time in the water. Over tens of millions of years of evolution, the hind legs shrank and eventually disappeared entirely. The front legs became flippers. The nostrils migrated to the top of the skull to form a blowhole. The body became streamlined. And what had been a small land predator became the most diverse group of marine mammals on Earth. The orca sits at the absolute peak of that evolutionary journey. For a large male, it is usually 9 meters long and weighing up to 6 tons. A brain that, in terms of the ratio of brain size to body size, is among the largest of any animal on Earth, second only to humans. MRI studies have revealed that orcas possess an expanded insular cortex, the region of the brain associated with emotional awareness and empathy. Their neocortex, the area associated with conscious thought, language, and self-awareness, contains more folds than the human brain. More folds means more surface area. More surface area means more processing power. Orcas build a picture of their environment through echolocation, sending out clicks and interpreting the returning signals to construct a detailed image of what's around them. This isn't passive like hearing. An orca can tell the difference between objects of slightly different densities through water at long range. It can locate prey in complete darkness at depth, and it does all of this while simultaneously maintaining social communication with the rest of its pod. This raises a fascinating question. Do orcas have their languages? The idea that orcas have dialects emerged in the 1970s through research by Michael Bigg, John Ford, and Graham Ellis, who were studying killer whale populations in the Pacific Northwest and observed consistent, group-specific vocalizations among different pods. What they found wasn't just variation in the sounds orcas make. It was that each pod had its own distinct repertoire of calls, shared internally and passed down to younger members, that differed enough from other pods to be identifiable. When pods from different groups encounter each other, they engage in complex vocal interactions, where each demonstrates its unique dialect. Sometimes this results in dialect mixing, where elements from different pod languages blend together. Young orcas learn to recognize and respond to multiple dialects, developing a kind of multilingual ability that helps them navigate the complex social landscape of their species. Recent research, using advanced analysis, suggests their communication may contain grammatical elements and properties similar to primitive language systems. Human languages feature grammar, syntax, and the ability to generate infinite new sentences. None of that has been definitively observed in orca communication, but the fact that their dialects are culturally inherited show variation across populations. All of this information makes what we chose to do with these animals even harder to justify. From the 1960s onwards, orcas were captured from the wild and placed in marine parks. SeaWorld became the most visible face of it. They took the intelligence of the animals and forced them to do tricks in a pool in exchange for the public's money. The psychological toll was documented but largely ignored. Confined spaces, stress, and forced contact could psychologically destabilize these social animals in ways that had no equivalent in the wild. And occasionally, the pressure broke through in more deadly ways. Tilikum, a male orca kept at SeaWorld Orlando for most of his life, was involved in the deaths of 3 people during his time in captivity. He is the most famous case, but not the only one. Several attacks have occurred in captivity over the past 50 years, with at least 4 being fatal. Some experts argue these attacks were not malicious, but play behavior that got out of hand. Others believe the pressures of captivity built to the point where the animals occasionally lashed out. Either interpretation points to the same conclusion that you cannot take an animal of this cognitive complexity, remove everything that structures its existence, and expect the outcome to be predictable. But here is what makes this really remarkable. In the wild, across every ocean, across every documented interaction spanning decades of research, there is not a single confirmed case of a wild orca killing a human. The same animal that was breaking trainers in concrete tanks was out in the open ocean making a different choice entirely. So why? That's the question that sits at the center of all of this. An animal with no natural predators, with the intelligence to plan, coordinate, and adapt, with the physical capability to kill almost anything in the ocean, and it doesn't touch us. The most straightforward explanation is diet. Different orca populations feed on specific prey, and these preferences are passed down through maternal teaching. Because humans were never part of their established prey systems, orcas show no natural interest in us as food. The prey map is set early, and it doesn't change. In some instances, fish-only orcas have been seen playing with and killing marine mammals, but not eating them, even when their group is starving. The leading explanation is a cultural taboo against eating marine mammals that runs so deep it overrides hunger. If that tradition holds, even when they're starving, the idea that a human in the water triggers any kind of feeding response becomes even harder to sustain. Unlike sharks, which sometimes bite humans due to mistaken identity, orcas use echolocation to build detailed images of potential prey. There is no evidence that orcas confuse humans with their typical prey, but the diet explanation alone doesn't cover everything. Because there are documented cases where orcas had direct physical access to humans and made what looked less like indifference and more like deliberate choices. In 1972, a Californian surfer named Hans Kretschmer was bitten by a wild orca. It is the only documented case of a wild orca biting a human in recorded history. The orca released him immediately and swam away. It had every physical capability to do far more and didn't. Antarctic orcas have attempted to wave wash people off ice floes using the exact same coordinated technique they use to hunt seals. In 1910, and again in 2010, there are documented cases of orcas targeting humans in small boats with wave attacks. Both times they stopped short. In 2010, it was the Frozen Planet film crew. The orcas generated the wave, watched the result, and moved off. Whether they recognized the humans as something other than prey mid-attempt, or whether something else caused them to stop, nobody can say with certainty. Scientists recorded 34 cases in which orcas offered fish, rays, squid, seabirds, and even turtles to humans, not consuming prey in front of people, actively presenting it. The same behavior documented between pod members, sharing food with each other. When researchers asked whether one reason orcas don't attack humans might be that they recognize us as intelligent, marine biologist Giles responded, "I don't know how to answer that, but if there is any animal on the planet that has the capacity to judge the intelligence of another species besides humans, it would be killer whales." The rule against attacking humans in the wild appears to be both biological and cultural, passed down the same way hunting techniques are passed down, the same way dialects are passed down, the same way everything an orca knows gets passed down, from mother to calf, across generations. Nobody taught them not to hurt us. They just don't. I hope you enjoyed the video today, and if you did, please subscribe and leave a comment. It really means a lot.